Hey folks, Colin Fleming here. I'm Adobe's digital publishing evangelist, and on Tuesday, the 23rd of April, I did a seminar online which was tips and techniques about building interactivity in DPS. And there's one particular tip I wasn't able to get to, so I thought I'd do a quick recording to show it to you. And it's a process and approach I use for getting buttons that have actions into a scrolling frame without losing the programming or actions. Now, if you want to take a look at the seminar, it ran almost an hour. You can see the link here on screen. Go take a peek. Hope it helps you. And now let's get on to this tip. So the situation I had was I had built an MSO. We can see here in this multi-state object, I have 4 states of this blouse. And I had built buttons, and these button actions would go to a particular state of that MSO. So that whole setup I covered in the online seminar. The part that I wasn't able to get to was a problem or a challenge when it comes to building something like a scrolling frame and putting buttons that already have actions into that scrolling frame. The problem really comes up with if I were to copy and paste the button, there are times and situations where the button will lose the actions. So let's take a quick peek at this. You notice I've got the green button selected, and over in the button and forms panel we can see that I have an action to go to the state 1 of the object called blouse. So if I were to cut this button and then paste it, notice how the actions have just been lost. This is something that happens in a number of situations, and that's going to make it hard for me to put these buttons into a scrolling frame unless I pull a trick. The trick is using the layers panel. So let me start to build the scrolling frame piece. Now, what I'm going to want to have happen is I want the series of buttons and their labels, the line above them, and the title, Discover the 4 Shades, part of a scrolling frame. I want it to scroll up to reveal the buttons and have the buttons function. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group all these objects, because eventually I'm going to put that group into the scrolling frame area. So I've grouped them. In the layers panel, I'm going to go ahead and hide that group for a moment as I build the content. I'm going to start by drawing the frame which will hold the content. That frame is going to sit right about here, and now I'm going to make it a scrolling frame. To do this I need content, and here's where the trick starts. I'm going to simply draw 2 rectangles. These 2 rectangles are going to be the initial content in this scrolling frame. I'm going to select the 2 rectangles, which will be content, and I'm going to group them. So the nice thing about doing this is they now become one thing. If I were to cut these pieces, cut that group, and then paste it into the container frame, that container frame can now be turned into a scrollable frame, like so. I'm going to hide my indicators. I'm going to use the original or the beginning document position, and now I've built that scrolling frame. Now it's not going to scroll anywhere because there's nothing outside of the container, but those 2 frames, that group, serves as a marker in the system. And if I go to the layers panel, I can roll open the graphic frame, and this is our scrolling frame. So I'm going to go ahead and name it. And then we can see the group, the 2 rectangles that are inside of that scrolling frame. Here comes the trick. So now I'm going to show the group which holds all of our buttons, the text, and the line. I'm going to take the group, I'm going to pull it into the group inside of the scrolling frame. You can only do this because I have a group as the content in the scroll frame. Now I can hide the 2 rectangles because I don't really need to see them. And the really nice thing about this process is if I go take a look at the buttons, and I'm simply double clicking to get into the group and into the subgroup until I get to the button, you can see that the actions are still here. So if I go take a look at this button, the action is still there, and we'll find the same thing for each of those buttons. So that's the trick. It's a matter of using a technique in the Layers panel, using a group in a scrolling frame so that you can then drag content into it. Once you've got the things inside, you can absolutely select those rectangles that we initially used, and you can delete them. Now I've got a scrolling frame. To make the scrolling frame work the way I really want it to work, I'm simply going to take that group, I'm going to pull it down and hide the pieces like so. So now when I go preview, we're going to get a scrolling frame that pulls up from the bottom. The buttons inside all function the way they were designed. So there you go. Using the Layers panel to add content to a scrolling frame by using groups in the Layer panel. Hope that was helpful. Thanks.